and a few South Sea islands on the other side. Now that may sound like hyperbole. Okay, time doesn't allow me now to go through the whole record. You can do it on your own. All you have to do is go to Google and type in peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine. And you type in those words, those annual UN resolutions will come up. What was the vote this past year? In November or December 2008, the vote was 164 to 7. The whole world on one side, Israel, the United States, Australia, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, and Palau on the other side. Some of you are laughing, others of you are a little bit embarrassed. You're in college, your peers know enough about Nauru and Palau to laugh, but you have never heard of them. So, by the way, I met the other day at Oxford, the champion in countdown. Quite ago. Very nice guy, modest. Nauru and Palau will be politically correct. Factually speaking, their combined populations can fit in the empty seats in this room. Same thing with Micronesia and the Marshall Islands. That's the vote every year. I could go through it, time doesn't allow. Let's just go back 20 years. 1989, they voted on the two-state settlement. It's 151 to 3. The whole world on one side, the United States, Israel, and the island state of Dominica on the other side. Well, this is becoming a real problem for Israel. Because Israel always likes to say, there are no peace partners. We're looking for a peace partner. And they all like to quote Abba Eban. The Arabs never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity for peace. But now the whole world says, okay, we agree on this settlement. Why are you voting no? Among the 164 nations, Iran is there. Go look. They agreed to those terms. So it's a problem for Israel. Then the problem gets worse. Because in March 2002, the main regional organization, the Arab League, it says we'll settle on a two-state settlement, a just resolution of the refugee question, and it says we'll even go one step further. Israel, just settle on these terms, and we're willing to have normal relations with you. Trade, tourism, and so forth. We'll enter into normal relations. Just accept the legally binding terms for resolving the conflict. The Arab League puts forth the settlement. What's the vote in the Arab League? The vote is 22 to 0. And the Arab League keeps renewing the offer, renewing the offer, renewing the offer. Some of you may have seen about 3 weeks ago in the Financial Times, a member of the Saudi royal family, he had an op-ed, and he said, how many times can we make this offer before we finally pull it off the table? Well, now it's a real problem for Israel. Those Arabs never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity for peace, and they keep saying, we're willing to settle. In fact, we're willing to have not just diplomatic relations, we're willing to have economic relations, we're willing to have tourism, just accept the legal terms as defined by the International Court of Justice. Well, now it really begins to get worse, because Hamas, it too says, we'll settle on the June 1967 border. So to take one, and I could cite more than a dozen examples, in March 2008, a little less than a year ago, the head of Hamas's political bureau, Khalid Mashal, he says in an interview, and now I'm quoting him, he says, there is an opportunity to deal with this conflict in a manner different than Israel, and behind it, the U.S. is dealing with it today. There's an opportunity to achieve a Palestinian national consensus on a political program based on the 1967 borders. And this is an exceptional circumstance in which most Palestinian forces, including Hamas, accept a state on the 1967 borders. There's an Arab consensus on this demand, but no one is willing to take advantage of this opportunity. No one is moving to cooperate with this opportunity. Even this minimum that has been accepted by the Palestinians and the Arabs has been rejected by Israel and by the U.S. Well, now we really have trouble. These Arabs are getting too moderate. But it's not only their words. Now problems really loom because they're even acting moderate. In June 2008, they enter into a ceasefire with Israel, Hamas. According to Israel's official website, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, they put out a document called the 6-month lull agreement. And what did they say? They say, quote, Hamas was careful to maintain the ceasefire. Now bear in mind what that means. Hamas was careful to maintain the ceasefire while Israel violated its fundamental responsibility under the ceasefire. The terms of the ceasefire were Hamas would stop firing rockets and Israel would gradually lift the blockade of Gaza. It didn't. But even though it didn't, Hamas was careful to maintain the ceasefire. The report goes on, the ceasefire was sporadically violated by rocket and mortar shell fire carried out by rogue terrorist organizations. At the same time, Hamas, says the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hamas tried to enforce the terms of the arrangement on the other terrorist organizations and to prevent them from violating it. Well, now we're headed towards disaster. Because not only is Hamas speaking moderately, but it's acting responsibly. So Israel can no longer say, how can we trust them? How can you trust them? They entered into an agreement, and they kept to the agreement, even though Israel flagrantly violated the agreement. And then it gets worse still. Because the head of Israeli internal intelligence, Yuval Diskin, he says, Hamas is interested in renewing the relative calm with Israel. So now we have a disaster on our hands. They want a long-term ceasefire. If there's a long-term ceasefire, they're acting responsibly, they're careful to maintain it, then Israel no longer has any pretext for not settling the conflict. And it was inevitable that pressure would build on Israel to start negotiating with Hamas. And so Israel was faced with this diabolical scheme of the Arabs to diplomatically resolve the conflict. There was the Arab League Peace Initiative. There was the Hamas support for a two-state settlement. There was the Hamas ceasefire. Israel had no choice. They have to break the ceasefire, radicalize or destroy Hamas, and eliminate a credible negotiating partner. And in fact, this isn't the first time Israel faced such a dilemma. There was a famous American ball player, Yogi Berra, and he was famously quoted as saying, "It's deja vu all over again." And this was deja vu all over again. Because in the mid-1970s, the PLO, then under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, he too, or they too, began to speak about supporting a two-state settlement. And this caused a real problem for Israel. It's because they don't want a two-state settlement. They want to keep the West Bank. And then in July 1981,